I just want to go over Dart real quickly so you have some familiarity with it. Now, if you've used other programming languages at this point already, you're going to notice a lot of familiarity. So here, for example, we have void main. And a main function, you're going to see familiar with things like Java, C++, etc. And in Visual Studio Code, which I'm using, I have an extension to work with Dart on this. You're going to notice that it gives me a run and debug options automatically. I can simply click on that and it's going to call main. Now, if I do not have a function main, if I have something else, for example, main2, you'll notice that the run and debug go away. It needs a main function to run. Now let's talk about setting up variables really quickly. So I have a couple of built-in data types, and so there's two main data types in Dart, strings and numbers. If I type in string, you're going to notice that it's capitalized, it's an object, and I'm just going to say something like S1. So you're going to notice that here is a standard variable name. It needs to start with a letter, can have letters, numbers, underscores in it. And it's going to equal hello world. You're going to note that my string is inside of double quotes and I end with a semicolon. So very, very familiar if you're familiar with the C style languages. I'm going to do string S2. Also hello world. However, notice that I use single quotes. The string will accept either double or single quotes. We just have to make sure that whatever we open it with, we end it with. This is familiar to languages like PHP and Python. So you see a little bit of examples in there. And just like in Python, printing out to the console is very simple. It's print, and then what are you using? In this case, we'll do print S1. When I use S1, you'll notice that the blue underline went away from the S1. If I hover over the S2, you're going to notice that it's a local variable and it is not being used. That is why it is underlined. It's just a little warning. So I would come up here and just click on run. You'll notice down below in my debug console, it comes up hello world and then exits. So very, very simple as far as how that goes. Now I can put literal strings or I can put variables inside of my print. Either one's going to work the exact same way. Just like with some other languages, we do not have to define the data type. So let's take a look at that real quick. I'm going to delete my string S2 and I'm going to remove the string from S1. But notice it gives an error. So if you're used to something like Python, where you don't have to define a variable, you just start using it, or maybe even JavaScript, then this is going to be a little bit different. However, just like in JavaScript, a good practice in here in Dart, a requirement is that I can start it with var. Var for variable, you see here S1, and now it's going to work. If I come in here and I run this again, notice that it prints hello world and I get the exited message saying that it completed. So I can define it by specifying var and not a data type, and Dart is going to use what's known as inference. So for example, I'm going to come over here, instead of saying hello world, I can say 3.141592. If I run that, you'll notice that it prints it out. It accepted it as the other major data type, which is number. Now that major data type number has two subdata types, integers and floating point numbers. Now the floating point numbers, it uses a double. And you can see that here. Okay, it's all lowercase. It's not a capital D like the string was. It is a native numeric data type. If I use int, you'll notice it has an error for this, and that's because it has a decimal number, and this is causing a problem. I can't assign a double to an integer. So I could come in here and change this to 3, and notice that it works. So the main native data types I'm going to be using are ints, doubles, and strings. There is one thing I do want to warn you about when working with numbers in Dart. And Dart is designed to be able to work in multiple environments, both native desktop applications as well as in a web browser implementation where it's going to be converted to JavaScript. Because of that, there are differences in what the value you're going to get out of a number when you go to run it, either in a desktop environment or in a web browser environment. So this mostly is going to occur on the outer limits of your numbers and how it formats it. Now, you can go to dart.dev to get more information about that. It's something that you probably aren't going to run into very often unless you're working with very large numbers, but it is something to keep in mind. Now, let's look at one other thing that Dart does that helps with keeping things what we call null safe. And Dart has a couple of different types of null safety features built in. Let's look at them real quick. And so if I'm going to have an integer and I'm going to specify Dart example, I can specify something like 4. And this works perfectly fine. Notice that it is using an all lowercase with underscores for my variable names. This is one of 3 naming conventions that is acceptable in Dart. I could also have int Dart example using a camel case type notation, and you can see this here. This is another common way of writing code in Dart. So either one of those will work. It was designed that way. That way, no matter what type of language you came from, what its preference was, you could start writing code in it. So let's look at another integer real quick. So I'm going to say, am I null? And if I make that equal to 5, you notice it doesn't give an error. But if I make this equal to null, you'll notice that it puts a red underline underneath null. If I put my mouse over this, it's going to say that a value of type null can be not assigned to a variable of type int. So what's trying to happen here? Well, typically I'm not, as a program writer, going to do this. I'm going to put am I null, and I'm going to set it equal to 0 if I don't get a value. However, if I'm pulling data from an outside source, I may have missing data, I may have corrupted data, I may have something I can't control that might give it a null value. So to handle this, after my int for am I null, I'm going to put a question mark. And this just lets Dart know that, hey, this might be null, so deal with it appropriately. And notice that putting the question mark there, allowing it to potentially be null, now takes that null value that was an error and no longer is underlined. This is completely acceptable. If I say I'm going to print, am I null? Come up here and run. Notice that it says that it's null. It's a null value, and that's acceptable. So just the way it works, it gives us the ability to be null safe. This is better in Dart version 2. And once again, if you go to the dart.dev website, you can read more information about these null safe features and the different levels of null safety that is available to you as a developer.